Welcome to another episode of Pastor Talk, the episode where pastors at LifePoint Church talk. And I am Pastor Tim here today with Pastor Joe to my left and your right. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm just glad that you know your right from your left.
Well, it gets tricky with cameras and multiple angles. You know that.
I'm going to swap it, so you're totally wrong.
Okay. So anyway, we're talking about vision today, and not corrective vision, as we both have glasses on, but vision as in your future. And nobody knows the future but God. But the Bible tells us that without a vision, the people perish. And so we want to talk today about what does vision for your life look like? Now, as we talk about this, there is something that businesses and churches use called mission and vision statements. And mission is more what you're doing today, and a vision is more where you want to see yourself in 5 and 10 years. And as a church, we're redoing our our vision statement as we speak. And we want to really think about where are we going? What do we want to stand for? What do we want to accomplish through God's help in 5 and 10 years? And we thought it'd be a good topic for you listening to also think about your future and where you're going, because wherever you're at today and whatever path you're on is where it's going to lead you towards the future. So is that a path that you want to see played out over the next 5, 10 years? Or do you need to, with God's discernment and direction, get onto a different path and go towards God's goals and kingdom goals for yourself and your family? And so that's our topic. We can talk about a few different bullet points along that, like your family, your marriage, your church, your business. But more generally, I think it's important to look at vision because everyone is so day to day now. It's hard to even think a few months ahead, let alone a few years, because of a lot of different factors and the way that as you get older, time seems to move faster, and the way the economy and the world seems to be. We're just like in survival mode. And I think that is often dangerous because we can miss out on opportunities that we have to look ahead and say, God, what do you want? What are you doing in this moment? But also, what can you do through my life and the areas that I influence to have a kingdom mindset for the next 5, 10 years?
So what we're talking about today with vision, and if you go to a business or a church or really any organization that has already thought about this, there's 2 parts. There's what is your goal? And then how are you going to get to that? That's generally kind of what we're talking about with vision. So I think the first thing to identify is, what is your goal? And if you don't have a goal, then what's the point of making steps to go towards something? What are you improving towards? And this can be any single part of your life, whether it's if you own a business or if you're leadership in a business. I think this is something that you have to figure out with your team and constantly be pushing towards that, or else you'll just aimlessly go, and everybody will have their own separate kind of goals that they're moving towards at any point in time, even if they don't realize it. But as a group, you have to decide, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. And that can also be in your marriage, in your family, and all these different things. When I think about my own life, I think one thing that's interesting is when you do start planning out, like, where do I want to be in 5 years in this aspect? Sometimes if you have a realistic goal, it feels like, well, that's not that far. Like, I'd rather live in a dreamland where my goal is, to 10 times my net worth and do all these different things. But in reality, if you look at what you realistically could achieve, it might feel like not that exciting to move towards. But if you don't have that plan and move towards something, you can go 5 years and be in the exact same spot or even move backwards. And it's so easy to do that, to just go on autopilot. And if you don't change anything, then and you don't have plans to change anything, then why would you end up somewhere else? What you've always done has got you here. And so if you don't change something, you're going to be in the same spot in the future.
Yeah, if you don't do If you don't change anything about what you're doing, it's going to be the same result. And then you're going to wonder, why do I keep getting the same result? It's because you never changed anything leading up to that, right? And so we kind of just go in this cycle. But I think it's important to distinguish between, secular goals and vision versus godly kingdom goals and vision. And there's a lot of good in both. And we have to have, I think financial planning is something that is more of a secular goal of saying, saving towards retirement or putting money towards a 401k. These are things that often you don't think about, especially in your 20s. When I was in my 20s working for a company that matched 401k up to 5%, that's just free money. And I didn't realize that as an early 20s, just working. And I was told like maybe 5-6 years into it that, why aren't you saving towards a 401k? And I'm like, I don't know. I never thought about it. Right. But it's easy to just kind of go through the motions without thinking long term, especially when you're younger. And you just think you're going to live forever and not really know what you're working towards. And so there's good goals in both. And I think as far as, bringing it over to kingdom goals is that a lot of times God won't reveal, more than just where you're at in the moment you're at. He's not going to show you the next 5-10 years of your life. And thankfully so, because it would freak you out and it would not prepare you for the moment, the strength you need before you go through certain things and trials of this life. He gives you the strength you need right before it, not years before it. But you're building up your character, you're building up your strength and your relationship with Jesus, hopefully now, so that you can weather the storms of this life. But being that God knows what's going to happen in the future, it's important to align with him so that when he gives you clear direction now, he's setting you up for something. And you may not know what that is, but it's obedience, which is important. Pastor Nathan talked about on Sunday is that, we don't need 100 more theologians in the world. We need 100 more Christians that will walk in perfect obedience with Jesus. Meaning that we have such a relationship with him that when he says, go do this thing that doesn't make sense to the world, that doesn't, follow all this logic of either your finances or, being a missionary, right? Any missionary doesn't make sense to the world to leave the comforts of your home and go serve, a third world country or wherever you go. That's just an example of logic that doesn't make sense. But if you're called by God, that's a very clear thing that you need to obey. And how do we know God's will for our life? Well, Romans 12:2 tells us that don't be conformed to the world, but transformed by the renewing of your minds. Then you'll be able to discern God's perfect and pleasing will for you. And so, everyone wants God's will and wants to know what God's will is. But first, the promise comes after we are transformed according to his mind and not the mind of the world. And then we're able to understand more clearly of this path that he has us on. And I know that, for both of our lives and many listening is that if you look in your past 5-10 years, and if you've been following God, you can see his hand upon areas of your life that you thought were either confusion was there. You were unsure about what would happen, but you see God's hand and provision through those times to get you out of it to where you are today. And maybe you're going through a dark time now, and you need to know that there is hope, for God to bring you out of it, because it's easy to say we go from glory to glory, but also in between glory is times of trials and these hills and valleys where God will bring you to the next point where okay, it brought you out of this. What did you learn from it? Where are we going now? And I know that's for my life when I was confused about either jobs or finances or things like that. I can look back and see that those moments were training for me for where God was leading me. And I didn't see, there was times of just God, what are you doing? I need out of this thing, or I need clear wisdom now. And it was really waiting on him and trusting him. And I'm able to see back with those instances, specifically with God hindsight, seeing that God was in it.
I think if you're talking about spiritual things and things of the Lord, sometimes it's hard to imagine and quantify what the future looks like in those things. But I think it is important. So let's do this. If you have money, because this is something that's really easy to just kind of visualize, you can say, okay, I have $100 this month that's kind of not going towards something. I can either use that and spend that on coffee throughout the month, buy a $6 coffee every few days and you're at $100 a month. Or I could put that into savings. In 1 month, that makes no difference. It does nothing. You have $100 more the next month. That's nothing. You'd rather spend that on enjoying the coffee. But if you do that for 50 years, and if you start that when you're young and you do it for 50 years, all of a sudden $100 a month, when invested in stuff, turns into a ton of money. And people always say, oh, I wish I started investing earlier. It's the exact same thing with spiritual things. If you say, I want to invest in patience, I want to invest in loving my wife, I want to invest in memorizing Bible verses. If you start memorizing, even if you just memorized one verse a month, in 1 month, you might not feel like you know any more of the Bible. But in 5 years, you would have 60 verses that you didn't have 5 years ago at the ready in your brain. And that's an enormous difference. If you are saying, okay, this month I'm going to love my wife better in this way. And then that becomes more normal and it builds off of that. And each month you add on to that, all of a sudden you are better at loving your family, at loving your spouse, at doing these things, whatever you set your mind to. And that will build over time. It's not just, okay, one more thing this month. I don't really feel any different. But over a year, 2 years, 3 years, it's a huge difference.
Yeah. It goes from anything from working out to eating right. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be those habits that you build in that you're going to see progression. You're not going to go work out once and be like, I don't see any difference, I'm just going to quit, right? You want to progress and keep going and persevere through it in order to see those goals. But if you don't have goals, first of all, that's something you have to just look internally, ask God about, ask your spouse about, ask a mentor about, because if you want a kingdom marriage, for example, and you grew up maybe in a household that you didn't have great parents, or you had a single parent, you might have no idea what a kingdom marriage looks like. You can read a book, you can maybe get some idea from the Bible about, the Bible verses that you read about husbands and wives, but it's still a hard concept to put into practice and also put into application with a vision. So what do? You look for resources. You look for people that have a 50-year marriage and successful marriage. You look for people that can, you go to marriage groups like ones we offer. We have a marriage conference at the end of the month. You put yourselves in positions to learn so that you can then apply what you learn, because we have so much information nowadays that we have, I think, very little application into what you can actually do to change, right? We hear 50 plus sermons a year, and how many times do we just let it go in one ear and out the other without letting the Holy Spirit reveal to us through revelation of how we can then apply it to our life? And through application of information, it actually brings transformation. Transformation doesn't come by hearing the word. It comes by doing the word. It comes by allowing God to do that through working through your spirit. So same thing goes with like a marriage, right? And so some people have like a vision statement for their marriage, or what are we going to stand for as a family, right? I don't specifically have that, but we do have specific things in our schedule that we do as a family of things we want to stand for. We make dinner a priority and talking at dinner. We make family devotions a priority. So that's just for me and my family, but it's important to know that you're doing something, right? And not just letting life happen, because your kids will be grown before you know it. If you're older, that's true. And so, you might need something more structured, especially if you don't have any structure now, so that you can build towards that. And seeking assistance from those that have gone on before, I think, is important too. Yeah. And,
just seeing those small things build up is one thing, but how you get there and what your end goal is the important part there, because you have to say what your goal is. Okay. So if my goal is knowing the Bible better, okay, then your vision is, how am I going to do that? What actual steps am I going to take to do that? If you want to learn a new instrument, say you want to learn guitar, your goal is to be proficient on the guitar, or however you want to phrase that, to learn how to play the guitar. If your vision is watch YouTube videos until you know how to play guitar, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. You have to have a vision that is actually going to get you there. If you have a vision that spend 15 minutes playing the guitar every day, you'll get there. If you have a vision that spend 1 hour every day, you'll get there faster. And so I think you have to take into account what your goals are and all these different things and balance your life. But if something's important to you, and there are things in life that are important to all of us, then making an appropriate vision to take those things to the next level is how you take those things to the next level. There's really, if you don't do that, you'll just kind of coast along and miss opportunities. Mm-hmm. With your kids, it's really easy to not invest in your children and then just try to get along and get them to school and get them back, and then all of a sudden 5 years later they're a lot older, and you realize that you missed out on a lot of opportunities to invest in them, to pour into them, to have a better relationship with them, to help them grow with God, to shepherd them.
Yeah. And vision changes over time. What your goals you had 5-10 years ago may not be the same goals today. I know for me, when I was in the business world, my goal was to be district leadership and have, go climb the corporate chain as far as I could. And that ultimately wasn't God's goal. And, I never thought I'd be a pastor. And so God had different ideas for me. And now that I am a pastor, my goals change on what do I want to do? How can I improve? How can I make sure I'm following God's kingdom model in ministry and in my personal life. And so just be honest and assess yourself. At the beginning of the year, many people do this with, New Year's goals. I don't love those because they quickly fall away. I think the average is like 2 weeks. People forget about them. So it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the year, but there has to be a time of assessment. Get together with your spouse, get together with the mentor and say, hey, I think with what I have in place now, this is where I'd like to go. This is what God is showing me about my future. This is what I'd like to do in my ministry, but also be willing to pivot as God grants you more revelation on something, right? Like I said before, he's not going to reveal the next 5-10 years for you. And so while you're on this path, God might be, okay, now we're going to shift. Now we're going to move over. And are you close enough to God and close enough your relationship with him that you can hear his voice when he calls you to shift and calls you to pivot? And that'll lead you on a new trajectory for your next 5-10 years. And so the goal is not to have it all figured out. And I know I'm more of a planner, and I would love to know, financially, are we set? What's going to be, where are my kids going to college? I would love to know all this stuff, right? And I've had to kind of, over the years, lay that down a little bit to God and be like, okay, just, even Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough problems of its own. And so it's not that we're creating these goals so we can worry about them. We're creating a vision for our future so that God can pour into us and we can walk towards a direction we think we're heading in Jesus. But also realizing that it's never about fear. It's never about just being in control, because God's in control. And that's why we attach ourselves to him.
Yeah, Jesus said, don't worry, but he is probably the most vision-oriented person ever.
Yeah.
He was so kingdom minded. You can see that through everything that he did, in everything that he valued, the way that he stepped away from the crowds, the way that he only said what his Father was saying. Jesus was extremely vision oriented. Yeah. He saw where he was going, and he knew where he was going. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of fear in the world. And I think if you look at the economy, if you look at other countries, if you look at the election, if you look at any metric out there, right, you can have a sense of fear of what is this, where is this going? What is going to be, the legacy for my children? What are they going to have to deal with, right? And that can put us in a state of fear just watching the news, looking at social media. And so I think as we close, our encouragement is just align yourself with God. He knows the future. He has everything. Some people say the world's falling apart. It's falling into place according to God, right? He will put all things to right. And in the meantime, we have a purpose, why we're here, to see his kingdom come and his will be done. And so if you're a Christian aligned with Jesus, you have an impact where you're at. He has equipped you with gifts. He's equipped you with resources. But again, you have to be connected to the vine, connected to the source of life, and not try to do things on your own.
We'd like to thank our sponsors.
Yeah.
Some of the most vision-oriented companies that we know of. Behringer, for every eyeglass needs that you have, so you can have perfect vision. All the time. And Lady Boss Shoes, their vision is to empower Christian women to be
and they're doing
powerful, confident, and to have confidence.
I know so many women that have been empowered by Lady Boss Shoes. So go grab yourself a pair today. And until next time, we'll see you next time on Pastor Talk.